You're listening to Potty Mouth Radio, the home of movies, music, television, and comedy.
And now, the hunt for the perfect album.
Hello everybody and welcome back to the Hunt for the Perfect Album with Billy and Dave, where this week it was Dave's turn to throw something at me, and do you want to tell the people what it is you threw?
Well, I'm still in disbelief that this isn't happening in our Patreon series True Classics, where we talk about albums that are obviously classics that everyone in the world knows.
Yeah.
I gave you Ziggy Stardust and Spiders from Mars from David Bowie, which, as we all know, is one of the most highly lauded albums of all time.
In fairness, I thought the same thing.
You do like music, right?
In fairness, I thought the same thing when I gave you Disintegration by The Cure. I would have given that to you like our first or second episode if I thought for a second that you hadn't listened to it.
That is a very, very fair call.
Yeah. So, you know, we're both in the wrong here, mate. But yeah, look, I gotta say, I know that you obviously are a huge Bowie fan. You know, your effigy on our artwork is the Bowman. But I've got to be honest, I have not listened to a huge amount of Bowie. You know, it wasn't the kind of music that I grew up with, really. You know, like I've said from my dad's side of the fence, it was folk music. From my auntie, who was my other big influence, it was your more kind of goth stuff. It was The Cure and the Smiths and all that kind of more emotional heavy stuff. So Bowie, I'm really only familiar with his hits. And like, don't get me wrong, I really like his hits, but yeah, I'd never dived into an album before. So let's hop straight into it then. So The Rise and Fall of Ziggy Stardust and the Spiders of Mars, which is a loose concept album.
It weirdly wasn't intended as a concept album when he wrote it. That was
I think
kind of retrofitted.
Yes.
And yet it's regarded as one of the great concept albums of all time.
Yeah, look, I'll come right out there. I disagree with that. This isn't a brilliant concept album. We haven't done a huge amount of concept albums on the show. I gave you Tallahassee by the Mountain Goats, and I think that might be the only one we've done to date. Oh, and of course, War of the Worlds, Jeff Wayne's, which I don't know if that really counts as
it's not a concept album. That's more of a rock opera, really.
Yeah, 100%. That's in the same realm as, you know, Tommy by The Who or, So, you know, I don't think as far as a concept album goes, I wouldn't say this is... Whether it's one of the greatest albums of all time, I think is a separate question, which I'm not going to answer right now. But I threw it on, and like I said, I was not familiar with...
So how many tracks on this would you have heard prior to listening to the album?
I want you to guess. I was just going to ask you that.
I am going to guess 3.
Yeah, you are correct. Yeah. So obviously it's an 11-track album. Only 3 of them I was familiar with. Not familiar with the first track, 5 Years.
News had just come over. We had 5 years left crying. News guy wept and told us was really dying. Cried so much his face was wet. Then I knew he was not lying.
So yeah, not familiar with that track. I didn't know what I was going into. Really liked it.
Very strong. And we should probably say, I mean, whether or not we feel it's successful. It sounds like you didn't necessarily buy into the kind of the story arc of the album. But ostensibly, the Earth, we find out the Earth only has 5 years to go before it's destroyed, and then this bisexual, androgynous alien rock star named Ziggy Stardust comes down to save the Earth, but then his ego gets the better of him, and he ends up falling prey to that. and then ends up, killing himself on stage.
Yeah. I don't think that conceptual. I don't think every track, for example, really lends itself to that story. I don't think that it's that strong of a story. This isn't Tommy.
You can definitely feel that, and this, as I said, this wasn't intended. That story was retrofitted to this. This album, Bowie and the band that would become known as the Spiders
from Mars,
Mick Ronson, and so had been recording for Hunky Dory, the album preceding this, and they had they basically recorded the tracks for both of these albums kind of in a great big long extended recording session, essentially. And they felt that the Hunky Dory stuff wouldn't really work live, and so they kind of made the second album of stuff that they thought would work live.
Right. Okay. Yeah.
And then it kind of. I'm sure Bowie had an idea about the story as he was ordering, deciding the order of the tracks and stuff for the album. Because it does follow a very clear, narrative structure if you know the narrative beforehand. I don't know that you necessarily get all of it.
That's right. Yeah.
Because it's not really until later in the album that Ziggy is introduced as a character.
Yes.
And, so it's a little,
So here's my thing. I'm going to get straight into it now and just give everything. So firstly, I really liked that track, and that kind of set the tone for me going forward with this album. Yeah, I needed multiple listens, particularly the back half of the album. The first 6 or so songs I thought were incredibly strong, and I was like, I love this. The back half of the album, half of it I didn't like at first.
Wow, which is where
probably
the two biggest hits and everything lie.
Well, it's where the concept comes into it, and for me, once you got into those songs that felt like they were written to be conceptual rather than written as a song, particularly I'm talking about Lady Stardust, for example, was the first song where I was like, I don't like this. On multiple listens, I did start to like that song, but it took me a while. So I thought the first half of the album was much stronger than the second half, but on the whole, after multiple listens, I loved the whole thing. To start with, I was like, there's tracks I like, there's tracks I think are okay, but after multiple listens, I really loved just about everything on this album.
Good.
Yeah, I do think that it's very, very, very strong. Once again, it took me multiple listens, but then I really dug it.
Who gave his life to save a slogan that hovers between the headstone and her eyes, for they penetrate her grieving. You love a boy and girl, the talking new words.
Yeah, I think Bowie, especially, like I said, I've only really heard like his hits. So coming into this as an album, and this I believe is like his 5th album, and obviously it's the very early 70s.
This is what broke him, really. So his first 2 albums are both self-titled. The first one kind of came and went, and it's sort of been rediscovered later.
Oh, he did a Weezer.
Is it kind of, yeah.
Weezer have had like 7 self-titled albums.
The second self-titled is where you get things like Space Oddity, and so it didn't explode at the time, but it's kind of the one that's viewed more fondly.
Yeah.
And then you had Man Who Sold the World and Hunky Dory, which are both, I mean, Hunky Dory in particular, very, latterly, very fondly looked upon. Outside of the UK, I don't think it charted particularly highly anywhere.
Yeah.
In the UK, everything's always done well for him, but Hunky Dory didn't really set the world on fire at the time. When Ziggy Stardust, particularly off the back of the single Starman, that's when he became a star, essentially. And obviously a lot of that is to do with the theatricality, the concept, the story, the character of Ziggy Stardust. This was the first of his personas, and obviously Bowie notorious. He's had so many personas through his career that are all very distinct, and none of them last more than a year or two.
Yeah, well, that's what I was going to say.
People think of Bowie and they think Ziggy Stardust lasted for about 18 months. It was this album, and then after this album, you get Aladdin Sane, which is a different character.
Yeah.
Like I've merged the two of them for our concept art. Yeah. I've got the outfit of Ziggy and the Aladdin Sane makeup, but Aladdin Sane, Bowie described as Ziggy goes to America. Yeah. That was when he broke the States.
Well, that's exactly what I was going to say is, as someone who's only familiar with Bowie's kind of big hits, I found it really interesting to go back and listen to a full album from this time period, because I do think one thing that Bowie has done incredibly well, which obviously helped the longevity of his career, is constantly evolving.
He and Madonna have done more successfully than anyone in history reinventing 100%. Themselves.
Yeah. So, because then we get to track 3, which is the first track that I recognized, of course, Moon Age Daydream.
Oh, really?
I'm an alligator. I'm a mama, papa coming for you. I'm a space invader. I'll be a rock and rollin' bitch for you. Keep your mouth shut. Just walking like a big monkey bird. And I'm busting up a brain for the world.
And at the time we got there, that was my favorite track. I love this song.
Makes sense.
It's a fantastic song.
I'm astonished that is one of the 3 that you knew if you only knew 3.
Really?
I'm now racking my brains to think which one of the 3 that I thought were just the gimmies that you hadn't heard. And I can't, for the life of me, 3 of his biggest hits ever are still to come, and one of them you hadn't heard, which I find insane.
Obviously the next track, Starman, is one that I had heard.
Yes. Oh, so
He'd like to come and meet us, but he thinks he'd blow our minds. There's a starman waiting in the sky. He's told us not to blow it, 'cause he knows it's all worthwhile. He told me, let the children lose it.
Which again is a fantastic song, obviously.
Might be my favorite Bowie song.
We haven't hit my favorite yet, although it is tough. Like I said, on multiple listens, it did change a little bit, but I think I'm settling on the next track, It Ain't Easy, as my favorite from the album.
Oh, wow!
Yeah.
Circulating round.
I really love that track. And stylistically, I don't think this album is super broad. Like, I think stylistically it does... Like, it has a nice flow to it, this album. It doesn't sound the same, but it all feels like it's in the same world. And I think, that's the first one that stretches a little bit outside of that. It's very, southerny, kind of bluesy.
Mm. It's weird because we've just gone through saying how amazing Bowie is over his course of his career of reinventing himself. But on the flip side, he's got a distinctive voice. You've got Mick Ronson's guitar. You've got Tony Visconti producing pretty much every album he's ever done. So there's also a consistency to his work, even though genre-wise it's changing, which is very interesting as well.
Yeah. The next track that I really, really loved was Hang On To Yourself, which was not one I'd heard before. So the only other track that I had heard from this album was Suffragette City. What am I missing?
Title track.
I'd never heard the title track. No.
Wow, that is wild to me. Absolutely wild. Wow.
Come on, we really got a good thing going. Come on, if you think we're gonna make it, better hang on to yourself.
So like I said, on my first couple of listens, that was in the lead for my favorite. But
it's super catchy. It's got a real 50s kind of rockabilly thing to it.
Yeah, but by the end, it was definitely It Ain't Easy. And then we get to the title track, which, I had never heard. So this was a hit, was it?
No. Well, see, that's what's so bizarre. the two singles off this album were Starman and fuck, what was the other one? Maybe It Ain't Easy. It was something that's not a big hit now.
Yeah.
And weirdly, a song we haven't got to yet, which I'm assuming is the other one since you hadn't heard the title track.
Well, Suffragette City was the other one I knew.
Which is a massive. I mean, that's on every best of ever.
Yes.
That was the B-side to Starman.
Right.
It wasn't even a fucking single. Which I that is wild to me.
Yeah, yeah.
That would be my number one pick to be a single if I was looking at this album, never having heard anything, and thinking, what's going to be the big radio hit? I would pick Suffragette City.
Yeah. Well, again, I find I find Ziggy Stardust bizarre. It was another one to me like Lady Stardust where I just didn't vibe with it my first couple of listens. Like, it really took a good 4 to 5 listens of this album. But that goes to show how much I enjoyed the rest of the album, that I was willing to keep listening to it over and over that many times. Like, it was in the space of about 3 days that I reckon I listened to this album 6 times. But it took until like the second last one before I finally started to vibe with some of these tracks from the back half. And Ziggy Stardust was one of them for sure.
Jamming good with Weird and Gilly and the Spiders from Mars. He played it left hand, but made it too far. Became the special man. Then we were Ziggy's band. Ziggy really sang. Screwed up eyes and screwed down hairdo, like some cat from Japan.
And I quite like it now. Like, listening to that now, I'm like, yeah, I vibe with this. But
see, I've literally,
listens, not at all.
As I do every time I listen to a Bowie, I've now changed my mind. That the Starman's now my second favorite. I'm back to loving the title track best. But it's so good. I just did a little quick sneaky check. So the two singles off this were Starman, which had a B-side, which was Suffragette City.
Yeah.
And the final track, Rock and Roll Suicide, was the other single.
Wow, okay, that's wild to me. I can't believe that I can't believe Moon Age Daydream.
Moon Age Daydream, it's astonishing too. And the title track, fucking hell.
Yeah.
Bizarre to me, absolutely bizarre.
I mean, Rock and Roll Suicide I liked, but again, it was one that really, really took some time for me to...
If we ever get to countdowns of mixtapes of greatest opening tracks and greatest closing tracks, this will be in both of those countdowns for me.
Patiently on your song, you walk past the cafe, but you don't eat when you've lived too long. Oh no, you're a rock and roll suicide. Shift breaks the snarling as you stumble across the road. But the day breaks instead.
I can't believe that was a single. I find that completely wild to me. It's an enjoyable song, and like you said, it's a good closing track.
It's not a radio-friendly song. It's an album. To me, it brings to mind things like I'm fairly sure you're familiar with Rocky Horror Picture Show, but
100%, yes.
Yeah. So when you get to the end of Rocky Horror Picture Show, and you've got you go from the stage show and then finally through into superheroes. To me, that's the vibe I get from Rock and Roll Suicide.
Yes, definitely. Yes, yeah. Look, I mean, like I said, this is a fantastic album. It really is. It did take me a few listens, but its highs are really high. Like I said, the fact that even though there were some tracks that I wasn't as high on, and I still wanted to keep listening to it over and over again. Like I said, literally about 3 days straight, I just had this on repeat.
I think it's got a really almost a perfect arc to it as an album, and one of the reasons, because it's not my favorite Bowie album. Yeah, it's probably maybe number 3 or 4 for me in Bowie's, because I love all Bowie albums. It's not even in my top 1 or 2. But I think as an album, it's almost a masterclass in how to assemble an album and have a flow through of track to track to track. I think every track is exactly where it should be. Every track goes from one to the next perfectly. Yeah. And and oh god, I mean, it's such masterful musicianship.
Yeah.
I mean, Mick Ronson's probably the most underrated guitarist in history because he's always in the shadow of Bowie.
Yeah.
But he is amazing. And then you probably didn't know because he's uncredited, but all the pianos, Rick Wakeman.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
Who at the end of this album, Bowie said, "Please join the Spiders," and he went, "Oh no, sorry, I'm joining Yes." And it was like, oh, fucking hell. And so he's not credited on the album at all, even though half the songs are piano forward rather than guitar forward. It's like a mix of the two.
I mean, one of my favorite things about this album actually is how drum forward it is too.
Yeah,
like I find that a lot of it is very, very based on the rhythm. And it's very drum forward, it's very bass forward, which, as a huge fan of bands like the Locksmiths, which we've spoken about how drum forward they are, The Cure being very bass forward in many, that to me was the most amazing thing about the instrumentation of this album. So,
I think it's Mike Woodmansey, I think his name is, who's the percussionist and the drums. So the Spiders, you've got Mick Ronson, who obviously on guitar, Trevor Bolder on bass, and then I think it's Michael Woodmansey on drums and percussion, and the actual Spiders doesn't have a fucking keyboardist or piano player, even though it's so prominent through all of it. Yeah, and that's because it's Rick Wakeman.
yeah. So look, big fan at the moment. I think I'm gonna have to say 9.
Oh, attaboy.
Like I said, there are tracks that took a while to grow on me. I would not say this is a perfect album. But I can obviously see why it has been regarded so highly for such a long time and does appear in so many lists of the greatest albums of all time.
That's right. I mean, I think this is this the highest you've rated something I've given you? I can't remember what you gave Marquee Moon, whether that was an 8 or a 9.
I really loved Marquee Moon, and I really loved The Primitives. Both of them would probably be up there as kind of.
I think The Primitives only got an 8. I think this might be.
Look, I got to be honest. That might change. The Primitives, I think, is the only. Album.
That's what we should do. What episode are we up to now with this?
When we get to 50, I think we're going to do our top. A playlist of our top songs from.
But I think we should also go back and re-rate.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
So my rating on a lot of yours that you've given me will change because I've now listened to them more times.
Yeah. Well, The Primitives is the only album you've given me that I've grabbed on vinyl, and I've listened to that a million times since.
Miserly fuck! I've bought several of the things you've given me.
No, I've been trying to find Joni Mitchell Blue. I've really been hunting for that because I loved that album. And I've been searching for Television by Marquee Moon as well. They're the two that I've really been hunting for. But yes, I really loved The Primitives. So, all right. Well, there we go. Next week.
Well, we can go and see them because they postponed their concert because someone got sick.
Oh, so that's right.
There's still a tour to come. So you couldn't get up for it last time, but maybe hopefully next time it'll be a time when you can get up to Sydney.
Well, I've been trying to get to more shows. This Saturday, in fact, Jebediah are playing in Canberra, so I'm hoping to get to them. But
what's that? What's his name from Jebediah does a side thing where he's under a different name or.
I'm giving you that quite soon.
Oh, okay.
Bob Evans, who I had a Bob Evans
I've never heard it. I just remember you I remember the backstory from when you were on the countdown for 90s pop.
That's what I was going to say. I had a song of his.
Indie his songs or something.
I believe it was my number 10, a song called Sore Eyes. So yes,
very good.
I'm just looking at the spreadsheet. It's episode 63. I'm giving you Suburban Kid by Bob Evans. Bob Evans is the name that he goes by. Kevin Mitchell is his actual name. But next week, I've actually just made a very late change. I was going to give you a different album, but I've changed my mind. And next week, I am giving you what I think, and look, I'm nervous about this, but I think it is the greatest Australian album of the last 15 years.
Jesus Christ.
It's a Melbourne...
15 years, actually. No, I'm old. I don't know any Australian albums from the last 15 years.
Well, the only reason I'm not saying of all time is because there are Locksmiths albums from before 15 years ago.
And you don't want to deal with the anger of Cold Pizzle fans.
But honestly, I think it's a fucking brilliant album, and I do think it really
What's it called? Have you told me what it's called?
I haven't yet. It's a Melbourne band called the Smith Street Band. And I'm giving you their album from 2020, Don't Waste Your Anger. It's not their most recent album. Their most recent album is called Life After Football, but Don't Waste Your Anger, I think, I don't even know how to describe it. If you look at them on Wikipedia, they are listed as a punk band, and there are punk-forward elements of this album, but honestly, I'm going to describe it as emo stadium rock. I don't know how else to describe it.
So that's My Chemical Romance.
I mean, like, alternative is probably just the label you could use. It has a really epic feel to it. I think the mixing and production is amazing. The lyrics are incredibly strong. I'm really curious to see.
So intrigued that a band I've never heard of are what you genuinely think is the best Australian album of the last 15 years.
I mean,
I'm hoping it's some undiscovered thing that's going to become my new favorite obsession.
I've got to be honest, like that says more about me than it does about you. Let's look them up. 110,000 monthly listeners, so they're not setting the world on fire.
Means nothing to me. I don't care how many listeners there are.
Yeah, but honestly, I think it is literally the best Australian album in the last 15 years. So I really hope that you enjoy it. Don't Waste Your Anger by the Smith Street Band. And I am going to play us out with a little bit of Suffragette City.
Yeah, you are.
Just put my spine out of place. Hey man, my school is insane. Hey man, my work's down the drain. Hey man, but she's a total blam blam. She said she had to squeeze a Dutchie, and then she